My name is Hannah, and if you've ever been painted as the disappointment in your own family, you'll understand the heaviness in my chest that night. Lydia, my younger sister, my rival since childhood, made sure I would not just attend her big day, but serve as her unspoken warning of what happens if you don't marry rich and young. The Grandview Manor glittered like a dream, the kind of wedding you see in glossy magazines, crystal chandeliers dripping with light, white roses spilling from tall vases, the air thick with expensive perfume and champagne bubbles. Guests leaned close in sequined gowns and sleek tuxedos, trading stories of careers, vacations, and connections. For a moment, stepping into that ballroom, I felt almost hopeful. I'd chosen a navy dress that hugged me in all the right places, a dress I thought said, "I am not invisible." But the folded card in my hand told a different story. Table 12, the singles table, the reject table. I followed the usher past glittering centerpieces and well-dressed couples, my heels clicking against marble. And then, humiliation. My seat was tucked in a dim corner near the kitchen doors, where servers rushed in and out with trays of food. Around me sat Lydia's single co-workers, who offered nothing more than polite nods before turning back to their conversations, and our frail great-aunt Janet, who muttered about how the music was too loud and asked, "Hannah dear, maybe if you lowered your standards." My smile was tight, my stomach knotted. It wasn't just the table. Lydia wasn't content with quiet cruelty. No, she wanted an audience. During family introductions, she yanked me toward Richard's relatives, polished people with names that carried weight in Boston's wealthier circles. Wrapping her arm around her new husband, Lydia announced with mock pride, "This is my sister Hannah. She's our little career woman still focusing on work instead of finding someone special." Polite chuckles. A pitying pat from Richard's aunt, Mrs. Wellington, who cooed, "Don't worry, dear, there's someone for everyone. Have you tried church groups?" Lydia's laughter rang out sharp, deliberate, cruel. "Hannah's very independent," she said, twisting the word independent until it sounded like a diagnosis. I tried to answer evenly. "I just haven't found the right person yet." But then, Richard's mother chimed in, warning me against waiting too long or ending up with fertility issues like her unfortunate daughter. Every comment was another knife. For over an hour, I endured a parade of unsolicited advice. Lower your expectations, settle like a spinster aunt, maybe even try widowers with 6 children. Each conversation reeked of Lydia's orchestration. She wanted to prove me pathetic, not just to herself, but to everyone. Then came the bouquet toss. The DJ's booming voice cut through the night. All the single ladies to the dance floor. I froze, wishing the floor would swallow me. I tried to slip behind a marble pillar, but Marion, Lydia's maid of honor, spotted me. Her manicured hand gripped my arm. "Come on, Hannah. This could be your lucky day." I stumbled into a circle of giggling 20-somethings, Richard's cousins, fresh-faced and carefree. My cheeks burned as Lydia's eyes locked onto mine. She smirked. Then, with theatrical precision, she hurled the bouquet in the opposite direction. A young cousin named Chloe squealed as she caught it. Lydia hugged her triumphantly, loud enough for all to hear. "Looks like Hannah will have to wait a little longer." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It was sharp, glassy, cutting through me. I stood frozen, shame tightening around my throat. Guests looked at me with that dreadful mix of pity and relief, the look people give when they're glad it's not their humiliation on display. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall here. I slipped back to my corner table, clutching my purse, heart hammering. This was supposed to be a wedding, a celebration of love. Instead, it felt like a carefully planned execution of my dignity. I thought about leaving, slipping out before Lydia had the satisfaction of watching me break. But before I could stand, a quiet voice cut through the noise behind me. "Act like you're with me." And in that moment, my life shifted. I was seconds away from fleeing. My fingers tightened around the strap of my purse, nails digging into the leather, when that voice cut through the chaos. "Act like you're with me." I spun around, startled. A man stood there, tall and composed, his charcoal gray suit tailored so perfectly it seemed sculpted to him. His dark hair caught the soft light of the chandeliers, and his presence was magnetic. Not the type of man who fades into the crowd, but the kind who bends it toward him. Before I could ask what he meant, He slid into the empty chair beside me, moving with the effortless confidence of someone who never needed permission. His arm draped lightly along the back of my chair, close enough that warmth seeped into my skin. "Excuse me?" I whispered, half ready to tell him he had the wrong person. He leaned in, his voice calm but edged with certainty. "Your sister just spent 10 minutes telling my business associate about how worried she is that you're alone. I figured you might not have asked her to share your private life with strangers." The air left my lungs. I followed his gaze and sure enough, across the room Lydia was gesturing in my direction, laughing lightly while Richard's colleagues nodded along, pity etched into their faces. My humiliation had become table talk. I clenched my jaw, words caught somewhere between fury and despair. He turned back to me, his eyes kind but steady. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked softly. Though truth be told, his tone carried no doubt. This was a man who had already decided to step in. I shook my head, too stunned to speak. And for the first time that evening, I didn't feel invisible. He extended his hand with a smile that was warm, mischievous, and just formal enough to feel rehearsed. "I'm William, Richard's cousin, visiting from Boston. And you must be Hannah, the sister who apparently needs saving from eternal spinsterhood." Despite everything, a laugh bubbled out of me. A real one, not the tight, forced smile I'd worn all night. "That's me. Family charity case." "Not anymore," he said smoothly. The words slipped between us like a promise. As he spoke, I noticed the subtle ripple he created in the room. Heads were already turning, conversations slowed, eyes flicked toward our corner. William leaned closer, speaking as if we'd been old friends reconnecting after years apart. His hand brushed mine casually on the table, and though it was just for show, my pulse raced. Across the hall, Lydia froze mid-conversation with the wedding planner. Her smile faltered. She blinked, like she was recalibrating a script that suddenly had a scene she hadn't written. Then, gathering her gown like armor, she began gliding toward us, her bridal train trailing behind her like a weapon. "Hannah," she called, her voice pitched higher than usual. "I didn't know you knew William." I swallowed, heart pounding. "Old friends," William said easily, without missing a beat. His hand pressed lightly against mine, grounding me. "We lost touch for a while, but you know how these things go." Lydia's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dangerous behind her smile. Her perfect composure cracked for just an instant, then she smoothed it over. "Really? Hannah never mentioned you." I inhaled slowly, then found my voice, steady and calm in a way that surprised even me. "I try to keep my private life private," I said. "You know how I am about work-life balance." The irony was delicious. Lydia had spent the entire night broadcasting my single status like an auctioneer, and here she was fishing for details she couldn't control. "How wonderful," Lydia murmured, though her tone suggested the opposite. "How long have you two been reconnecting?" "Long enough," William replied with a smile that gave nothing away. I held his gaze for a moment, then glanced back at Lydia. For once, she looked unsure, and that uncertainty, the tiny crack in her flawless mask, felt like the first sip of water after years of thirst. As she turned back to her guests, I heard William's voice low against my ear, threaded with humor. "She looks like she just bit into a lemon." I couldn't help myself. I smiled. Wide, genuine, unstoppable. For the first time that night, I wasn't Lydia's prop. I was something else entirely. A mystery she couldn't solve. From the moment William's arm rested lightly behind my chair, the air around me changed. Conversations at nearby tables softened, like people were trying to listen without appearing obvious. A ripple of curiosity spread across the room. Lydia hated nothing more than losing control of a narrative, and I could see it on her face, the crack in her perfect wedding smile. She lingered near our table longer than necessary, clutching her champagne flute as though it were a lifeline. Her eyes flicked between William and me, searching for a thread of truth to unravel. "So," she began, her voice sing-song sweet, "how exactly did you two reconnect?" William's smile was easy, effortless, like he'd rehearsed for this moment his whole life. "Old friends," he repeated. "Boston has a way of circling people back together." "Boston?" Lydia's brow arched, the faintest twitch of disbelief. "Yes," he replied smoothly. "Family ties there, business ties too." He leaned back, casual, his hand brushing against mine again, subtle but deliberate. And Hannah's always had a way of leaving an impression, hard to forget. Heat rose in my cheeks, not embarrassment this time, but something closer to pride. My whole life, Lydia had painted me as the forgettable one, the placeholder, until something better came along. Hearing William say otherwise even as part of this performance hit deeper than I expected. I finally added, my voice steady. Not everything I do needs to be public knowledge, Lydia. You know I value my privacy. Lydia's lips twitched. For a moment she seemed at a loss, then forced out a brittle laugh. Of course. I just find it so surprising you never mentioned him. We share everything, don't we? I almost choked on the hypocrisy. Share everything? Lydia had spent years hoarding approval like treasure, doling out just enough crumbs to keep me in my place. Some things are better kept for the right moment, I said quietly, holding her gaze. It was subtle, but the win was mine. Lydia's wedding composure cracked just enough for me to glimpse the raw irritation underneath. She excused herself with a strained smile, her gown swishing like an angry curtain as she turned away. William leaned in, voice low, conspiratorial. You held your own beautifully. She hates that. A laugh escaped me, shaky but real. You don't even know her. I don't need to, he said simply. Some people advertise their cruelty like perfume. You can smell it a mile away. I sat back, letting his words settle. For years, I'd questioned whether I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too easily wounded by Lydia's jabs. But in a few sentences, William had reframed it. Cruelty wasn't my weakness to endure, it was her character to expose. Across the room, Lydia whispered urgently to Marion, her maid of honor. Both of them cast glances at me, their faces pinched with frustration. For once, it wasn't me under their microscope, it was them, scrambling to figure out who William was and how I had managed to secure his attention. William raised his glass, clinking it gently against mine. To keeping her guessing, he said, his smile edged with mischief. I found myself smiling back, not the polite smile I wore like armor, but something freer, something dangerous. For the first time in years, Lydia wasn't steering the story. And oh, how I could see her struggling with it. The band struck up a slow melody, soft strings and piano floating through the hall. Couples began to drift onto the dance floor, their movements graceful, rehearsed, like something out of a film. I sat frozen, still clutching my glass, trying not to shrink back into the shadows. Then William stood, his expression calm, his presence commanding. He extended his hand toward me with the confidence of someone who never feared rejection. Dance with me, he said. It wasn't a question. My first instinct was panic. Everyone will stare, they'll see through this, they'll laugh. But his gaze was steady, inviting, like an anchor in storm water. I set my glass down, slid my hand into his, and let him lead me forward. The moment his palm rested against my waist, I felt a jolt not just of nerves, but of unexpected safety. He moved with quiet assurance, each step guiding me as though we had danced together for years. My other hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and suddenly, the din of the room faded. Still, I could feel it, the weight of hundreds of eyes. Richard's relatives, Lydia's friends, every person who had pitied me only hours ago, they were all watching. This time, though, the pity was gone. I caught glimmers of something else. Curiosity, surprise, even admiration. You're trembling, William murmured, low enough that only I could hear. I don't dance, I whispered. Sure you do, he said, smiling. You just needed the right partner. His words steadied me. The music carried us, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel like prey. I felt seen. Across the floor, I saw her, Lydia, standing stiffly with a champagne glass in hand, her face a mask stretched too tightly over panic. She was whispering furiously to Richard, her eyes locked on me, as though sheer willpower could unravel what she was seeing. She's watching, William murmured, lips close to my ear. I know. She looks like she's going to explode. I almost laughed almost. But then, as if summoned by her fury, Lydia appeared at the edge of the dance floor, her gown shimmering under the chandeliers, her smile wide and sharp. Mind if I cut in? She said, her tone falsely bright. Richard hovered behind her, clearly uncomfortable, but Lydia's eyes never left mine. My throat tightened, but before I could answer, William's voice cut through, firm yet polite. Actually, yes. We're having a moment. The silence was instant, like the music itself had dipped. Lydia's smile faltered, her perfect facade wavering. I just wanted to say, she pushed, her voice thin with strain, how happy I am that Hannah finally found someone. We were all so worried about her. Were you? William's words came smooth but sharp, slicing through the tension. Because, from what I've seen tonight, it seems like you've been more interested in broadcasting her single status than supporting her. The color drained from Lydia's face. Richard shifted beside her, tugging at his cufflinks as though he wished he were anywhere else. We just want what's best for Hannah, Lydia stammered, her wedding smile trembling at the edges. Then maybe treat her with the respect she deserves, William replied calmly, instead of using her love life as entertainment for your guests. For a moment, I thought Lydia might break. Her eyes darted around the crowd, realizing the confrontation wasn't private. Guests were listening. People were watching her. And she, the bride, was suddenly the one looking small. Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we should let them get back to dancing. With that, he guided her away, though not before I caught the flash of fury in her eyes, a silent vow that this wasn't over. But for me, something shifted permanently. As William's hand guided me through the next turn, I realized I was no longer simply enduring my sister's cruelty. I was reclaiming myself, step by step, under the gaze of everyone who had once pitied me. And oh, how sweet that revenge felt. After the dance, I thought the night had already peaked in its surreal brilliance. But William, it seemed, wasn't finished. When the band paused between songs, and the waitstaff began preparing for dinner, William leaned close, his voice calm but purposeful. I can't let you sit back in the shadows. Not tonight. Let's get us a better table. I blinked. What? We can't just… But before I could protest, he had already signaled discreetly to a server, speaking in low tones I couldn't hear. The young man's eyes widened, then darted toward Richard's family table before nodding quickly. Within minutes, the arrangements shifted, like invisible dominoes falling. Our dietary needs require us to be closer to the kitchen, William explained smoothly to the maitre d'. The explanation was paper-thin, but nobody questioned him. Not when he carried himself with such authority. Not when the staff clearly recognized him as someone tied to Richard's powerful family. And just like that, my life changed by several feet of polished floor. We were ushered to a table near the center of the hall, one reserved for high-profile relatives and honored guests. The kind of table where people were meant to be seen. As I slid into my seat, I felt the weight of the room shift with us. It was subtle at first. Richard's colleagues, who had barely spared me a glance earlier, now leaned in, their expressions curious. Lydia's friends, who had once laughed at me during the bouquet toss, began approaching with cautious smiles, eager to meet the man at my side. Even Mrs. Wellington, the same woman who had suggested prayer groups earlier, appeared at our table with a beaming face. "Hannah, you dark horse," she said, her voice now bubbling with admiration. "You never mentioned you were seeing someone so accomplished. William, dear, are you in Boston full-time?" William smiled politely, answering with just enough detail to intrigue without revealing too much. He spoke of business ventures, of ties to Harvard, of travel, all of it delivered in a tone that was conversational but magnetic. He didn't boast, he simply existed in a way that made people lean closer. And they did. They leaned closer to both of us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten older sister, the afterthought, the single woman to be pitied. I was the center of the conversation. Laughter bubbled at our table, heads turned our way, and people listened, truly listened, when I spoke about my work in marketing, my love for hiking, my recent trip to Ireland. These weren't things that had ever impressed Lydia's circle before. But tonight, they did. And across the room I saw her. Lydia, her perfect bridal smile frozen in place, eyes darting like a hawk circling prey it could no longer reach. She whispered furiously to Marion, who nodded and cast glances in our direction, as though trying to solve a puzzle. The irony was almost too sharp to bear. The sister who had orchestrated my humiliation was now choking on her own creation. The spotlight she had tried to shine on my loneliness was illuminating something entirely different, something she couldn't control. William caught my gaze and, with a subtle tilt of his glass toward Lydia, murmured, "She's unraveling." I hid my smile behind the rim of my drink, savoring every second. For years, Lydia had turned me into the family cautionary tale. Now, at her own wedding, she was the one on the outside, watching me command attention she could neither spin nor steal. It wasn't just revenge, it was revelation. By the time dinner plates were cleared and champagne glasses refilled, the air in the hall buzzed with energy. The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers, his tone almost theatrical. "Gentlemen, it's time for the garter toss." I felt my stomach tighten. I'd already endured the bouquet fiasco, surely Lydia wouldn't. But of course she would. This was another opportunity to remind the room that I, the elder sister, was still alone, still the punchline. Richard stood in the center, grinning as he prepared to toss the garter into the sea of waiting men. Guests gathered in a loose circle, cheers and laughter echoing beneath the chandeliers. I stayed seated at our table, willing myself invisible. Then William stood. Not hurriedly, not nervously. He stepped forward with the same unshakable confidence he'd carried all night, the kind of movement that made the crowd instinctively part to let him through. "Wait." Lydia's voice rang out sharply across the hall. The music faltered for half a second. She forced a bright smile, though her eyes glittered with panic. "William, you're not single." Every head turned. The crowd held its breath. William glanced at me, then back at Lydia, a slow smile curving at his lips. "Actually," he said, voice smooth as silk, "I am. Hannah and I are taking things slow, getting reacquainted." The words struck like a spark on dry kindling. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, curious glances snapping back to me. Lydia's face, her face tightened into a mask of fury so brittle I thought it might shatter right there beneath the golden lights. Richard, shifting uncomfortably, tossed the garter high into the air. The room seemed to hold its breath as it spun, gleaming under the chandeliers. And then, it landed directly in William's hands. Applause and whistles erupted. The DJ's voice soared above the chaos. "And tradition says, William gets to place the garter." For a heartbeat, I froze. The symbolism was unmistakable. My mind screamed, "No, too much, too far." But then William's eyes met mine steady, questioning, waiting for permission. I nodded. The crowd cheered louder, as a chair was pulled into the center of the floor. My legs trembled as I sat, every eye fixed on me. William knelt gracefully before me, sliding the garter up my leg with a tenderness that made my breath catch. The moment was intimate, theatrical, charged with something neither of us had expected. The hall erupted. Laughter, clapping, even hoots of approval filled the air. Where only hours earlier, I had been the subject of pity, now I was the centerpiece of admiration and envy. And Lydia, my perfect, cruel sister, stood at the edge of the crowd. Her bridal smile stretched so tight it looked painful. Her eyes burned with fury, with disbelief, with the realization that her carefully constructed stage had spun out of her control. For once, she wasn't the star of her own wedding. I was. By the time the last song faded and the servers began stacking chairs, I felt like I was floating through someone else's life. Guests hugged goodbye, their laughter echoing down the marble halls, while I lingered near the edge of the ballroom, unsure of what to do with myself. William never left my side. He guided me through the final rounds of chatter, always attentive, always steady. When people asked questions, he answered with effortless charm. When Lydia's bridesmaids tried to pry details, he deflected with humor. It was a shield I hadn't known I needed. But eventually, the crowd thinned. The chandeliers dimmed to a softer glow, and reality crept in with the silence. "I should get going," I murmured, clutching my purse again, the old nervous habit returning. "I'll walk you," William said simply. We stepped into the cool night air, leaving behind the noise and spectacle. The parking lot stretched before us, quiet and still, the scent of cut grass and faint cigar smoke drifting on the breeze. My heels clicked softly against the pavement, each step echoing in the stillness. At my car, I finally turned to him, searching his face for, I didn't even know what. Gratitude? Answers? Proof that any of this had been real. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. For tonight. You saved me from what could have been the most humiliating night of my life. His expression shifted serious now, no trace of the teasing smile. What makes you think it was just an act? My heart stuttered. Because you don't even know me. He stepped closer, not crowding me, but near enough that I could see the flecks of light in his dark eyes. I know enough. I know you're kind, even when people don't deserve it. I know you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I know you're beautiful, inside and out, and I know your sister is blind for not seeing how lucky she is to have you as family. The words hit like a flood. For so long, Lydia's cruelty had shaped how I saw myself: small, unworthy, pathetic. But here was someone who had looked past her games and seen me. My throat closed. For once, words failed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple business card, his handwriting scrawled elegantly across the back. He pressed it into my hand. If you want to see me again, not for revenge, not to prove a point, just because you want to call me. The card trembled between my fingers. My pulse hammered. What if I want to call you tonight? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. That smile returned confident. Sure, the same smile that had disarmed Lydia hours earlier. Then I'll answer. For the first time that day, the tears that filled my eyes weren't from humiliation. They were from something far more dangerous. Hope. 3 months after Lydia's wedding, William and I were officially dating. What started as a rescue mission at a reception table turned into coffee dates that stretched into midnight conversations, long walks where silence felt as comfortable as words, and laughter that came freely without me bracing for the punchline. 6 months later, we moved in together. I still remember standing in the middle of his apartment, boxes piled around us, both of us exhausted from the move. He reached for me, dust smudged across his cheek, and said, "This feels like home." And for the first time in my adult life, I believed someone meant it about me. Exactly 1 year after Lydia's wedding, he proposed. Not with fanfare or staged drama, but quietly, in the very same hotel where we'd first met. He knelt, holding a simple, stunning ring, and whispered, "What started as an act is now my whole life. Will you marry me?" I said yes, tears streaming, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. When we announced our engagement, Lydia's reaction was everything I had once dreamed of: shock, disbelief, and a smile so forced it looked painful. My sister, who had spent years belittling me for being single, now had to watch me marry a man who not only adored me, but came from an even wealthier family than her, Richard. The irony could have been scripted. But here's the thing. The real victory wasn't Lydia's dismay. It wasn't the reversal of status or the whispered envy from her friends. The real victory was realizing I didn't need her approval anymore. Our wedding was smaller than Lydia's grand ballroom spectacle, but infinitely more joyful. No games, no staged humiliations, just laughter, music, and people who genuinely wanted us to be happy. William's vows left not a dry eye in the room, and when I looked around at my family, yes, even Lydia, I saw something I hadn't expected. Acceptance. Lydia insisted on giving a maid of honor speech. It was revisionist history at its finest. How she'd always known I'd find someone, how she was so happy for me, how William was clearly perfect. It was almost laughable, but I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't need to. Because while she rewrote the past, I was living my future. Looking back, Lydia's wedding was both the worst and the best night of my life. The cruelty she orchestrated to make me feel small ended up opening the door to something bigger than I ever imagined. Without her humiliation, I might never have been vulnerable enough to accept William's help. Sometimes the people who try hardest to break you are the ones who hand you the very tools to build yourself stronger. Lydia wanted me to feel pathetic, to prove I was unlovable. Instead, she created the stage for me to meet the love of my life. The irony is perfect. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living so fully, so joyfully, that their opinion no longer matters at all.